Before I begin talking about this episode of Gintama, I have a quick announcement to discuss. So, just yesterday, it was announced that Gintama on, I think, December 2nd, give or take a few days, in December, the beginning of December, Gintama is going to be entering its first serious arc since its return. We are going to be entering the Shogun Assassination arc. This is the arc I have been told is an arc that is the game changer for Gintama. A lot of shit has happened since that arc, and if I am hearing correctly from you Chibits in the comments, Gintama hasn't really been that happy since that point. So we're finally getting to that moment to where Gintama is going to get very serious. And so the main thing I need to ask right now, how hyped is the manga readers right now with this news of finding out that the Shogun Assassination arc is coming in December, beginning of December? So that's quite the good Christmas present, I think, for the manga readers, but also it's quite the present for us as the anime onlys to finally see why the manga readers were saying that the arc is going to get fucking great. So now that I've said that, let's get into this episode of Gintama. So we enter a new arc, which is going to be carrying over into next week's episode, which I'm quite happy with, because this episode is way too funny just to settle it in one episode. So next week's episode seems like it's going to be focusing around, like, the funeral service of Kagura, and that is probably going to be so much fun, because, I mean, if we could take anything from this episode, when it came to the funeral chatting, that was priceless. And then seeing how it's probably going to go into that in next week's episode, I can already imagine the dark humor we're probably going to get next week, but I'll save that for when the episode comes out. So, what is the main point of this episode? Yes, this episode actually does have an underlying meaning to it that I don't think many might recognize depending on what type of lifestyle you have lived, and I recognized what this episode meant right off the bat, because the main point of this episode, besides Kagura, trying to fake being ill and make, Gintoki feel bad, the main point is Kagura, she was trying to cry wolf. She was trying to make it to where people loved her. For instance, people cared about her. For instance, she wanted them to feel guilty before they could show her affection. And so you could take the story of the boy who cried wolf, and that's kind of what Kagura was doing. She was pretending or lying about her being ill, which eventually led it into where the situation went out of hand, and then now she is kind of ill, and you have it to where she can't really say, oh, I was lying about it, or I'm sorry what I said. She can't really say that because she's in a bad position right now when it comes to her being in the hospital. So the entire point of that right there was meaning that never lie, because the boy who cried wolf, like, if you lie too many times, there will come a time or day, or whatever time in the future, to where people won't believe you for what you say. And that's kind of what that meant right there. So pretty good meaning to that point. But there's another meaning, underlying meaning towards the second half of the episode, which I cannot believe, which actually, I take that back. I kind of expect that, because, I mean, it is Gintama, and it loves dealing with controversial topics. So the second half, when you have it to where everybody's talking about the funeral service, like how they're going to handle the funeral, or like Kagura's death, and stuff like that, that right there was very mature. Like, you're probably like, whoa, it was a lot of comedy. Let me explain why it was mature. I think all of us, at one point in time, have probably either A, watched a show, B, been in a situation like that, or C, you might not have heard of it. I mean, that might be it. But I mean, I believe that everybody has, at the very least, heard about where a family member dies. Let's take a good example. Let's say you have 5 children, okay? 5, all brothers, okay? They're all brothers. Actually, no, 4 brothers, 1 sister. And then the parents, let's say the father passes away, and so does the mother. They pass away at the same time, natural causes. They pass away, and for some reason, they didn't really leave a will. Like, they didn't leave a will or a conclusive will, and they decided to give this will maybe up to the one daughter. And then the daughter was supposed to handle all the inheritance when it came to the individual brothers. Now, here's the thing. With the way the discussion was being brought up with Kagura and everybody else talking about her death, it was kind of like siblings or family members coming around and, like, discussing a death, like, okay, so how are we going to handle this death? Who's going to be paying for it? What are you getting out of this? Are we getting this? Are we paying for this? That's kind of what that entire discussion was about. And seeing that type of stuff, I think might fly over many younger watchers' heads when it comes to this episode of Gintama, because the main point of the episode was just to make fun of people or situations like that, to where family members are fighting over belongings of a deceased family member, because this shit happens. I've seen this shit happen. So, to see that, I was just like, whoa! Gintama using that dark humor. Very subtle, because it was like, under the radar. You wouldn't recognize that unless you've been in it yourself, and I'm like, oh shit. So, Gintama, I award you points for that. I award you points for doing that type of tactic with this episode, and not many would have gotten that. So, good job, Gintama. Okay, so let's talk about the comedy now. Now that I got all the main points of discussion on the way, I died laughing, I think, around the 9th to 10th minute mark, where Gintoki was upset, he was feeling bad, and he was doing anything he could to comfort Kagura, and when he went to go get her, like, some pudding, he was back in a fucking second. Like, what the fuck? It was so fast. Like, the reaction of Kagura was my exact reaction. When she started speaking, like, whoa, too fast! And then as it continued on, he kept going back and forth, like he was instant. Like, you see Gintoki, he's just breathing heavy. He's like, he's just breathing so fucking heavy because he's running so fast. And then when, you know, Kagura says, like, it's like 2 stories fucking down, how you doing it that fast? And then when we find out he went to go get his jump, his weekly jump, and he's like, oh, I was trying to read it, but for some reason, I think this is next week's issue. And then Kagura's like, whoa, you somehow went to a store in the future? How? So, I just died. I died at that scene. That scene was just so good. Even the Kagura faces, like when she was being all evil and trying to manipulate Gintoki and everybody, like, oh, I'm gonna fake to be ill. Oh, I couldn't help but laugh throughout this entire episode. So, good job, Gintama, for bringing me another good laugh to a Wednesday. And I cannot wait to see where next week is going to go, especially with the funeral service. And also, I can't wait to see how the Shogun Assassination arc is going to be animated, since there's been so much talk about it before Gintama 2015 even started to air. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. You all have a wonderful day or night wherever you live. Please be safe. Chibi out.